A little bit. I'm put it this way. I think I'm the third most popular person in my house. I only
Well,
live with
better
two
than
other
me.
people.
Well, it works. Eric, you are a music. I'm not sure what to even call you. A publicist, a bunch of other stuff. Not sure where you went there for a second, but what do you? Before we get into it, we have a question of the week that I ask
Yeah.
everybody. We normally go for about a half
Okay.
hour. So,
Sure.
question of the week is: if you could only eat one sandwich for the rest of your life, what sandwich would it be?
Oh, that would be the one that I eat now, which is peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I've lived on that during this whole quarantine. And I lived on that for my teenage years up until like yesterday. So peanut butter and jelly.
That makes sense. So let's actually get into it, though. With every, go away, child. You're not allowed here. So with everything that's going on in the world, I love you. And everything that you do, you've worked with some amazing bands from what I was reading, Nickelback, Black Eyed Peas, to some of the huge bands out there. When it comes to music and the newer stuff versus the older stuff that you first started with, what are the differences that you see between the artists between the olden days and now?
Yeah, working as a publicist for the last 25 years and being a music fan since the first time that I saw the Buddy Holly Story movie and American Hot Wax, which told the story of the Cleveland DJ Alan Freed, when I was 8 years old. I mean, that was the music that I grew up on. I wanted to do that. I wanted to surround myself with music and musicians, but I couldn't play. I had no musical talent. I still don't. So growing up, it was the music of musicians writing their own songs and playing their own songs and gigging and touring and playing to two people and the waiter or waitress at that bar at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's when you learned how to be great. You had to learn how to converse with the audience. You learned how to write 150 songs in order for two of them to come out good and then fix one of them to be great. So to me, the music of yesterday and today, it's really the same to me. Obviously, the genre that are popular are different. You've got a lot more urban and rap and hip hop and R&B styles, but the way that the artists are climbing up the popularity and the sales poll is much different. Now you have, of course, artists that are selling out arenas based on 2 or 3 hits that they landed a really great video. It doesn't make them lesser. It doesn't make them less respectful in my life or the way that I see music. It's just different. But whenever I post something about maybe the Archie Sugar being the biggest selling song of 1969, people will say, oh, well, that's kind of not really nice in relation to what was going on, like Woodstock and the Beatles and Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison. That's the same kind of snarky comment that I get whenever I post about Cardi B and Justin Bieber now. That's not music. Of course it's music. You're just old.
It's funny because we turn into our parents, right?
Totally.
Growing up, oh, that kiss is the devil. Ooh, you can't listen to that.
What's interesting about that, though, it's funny because I go with my daughter, who's now 17. So her and I go to concerts all the time. And we see artists like Post Malone or the Chainsmokers, partly because I'm interested in what they're like live and partly because I like them. Chainsmokers put on some of the best concerts I've ever seen in my entire life. But It's funny because when I look around with shows like that or Pink or the Dixie Chicks, there are way more parents going out to these shows than when I was going to see like Genesis and Pink Floyd and The Who. That was a clear division of rock and roll of this is my music, and you parents, you like Perry Como and you like, Frank Sinatra, and the two never met. You needed that anger and that's not music kind of attitude between the generation gaps. That's what made people pick up an instrument almost in the first place, was to show the world that I have a talent. Here I am. Understand me. Hear me out. Because my own parents don't have that. It's why artists will sleep on the floor and struggle for years because they don't want to live at home anymore. Now, pop music is all about the mom and dad going with the teenage daughter to go see Taylor Swift. and that's okay. It's what music brings people together with the community spirit in mind.
I think it's changed from a lot of the world has changed because this is going to sound bad, but the generation that's coming up now is going to have to live with their parents until they're 25, literally have to, before they can move out on their own because they can't afford anything. So the parents have now become friends of the adult children, if that makes sense. So,
you know what? There's a lot of studies out there that are going to be not only created, but created in the future about what happens when your parent becomes your best friend. You know, the quarantine right now, you know, if we're going to date this interview, the quarantine right now is not only bringing out a lot of potential divorces that we've seen overseas, but it's going to show a lot of the rift and a lot of the divide, or a lot of the opposite, which is love of parents hanging out with their kids 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My daughter said this to a couple of interviews that she did in the media this week because she's an activist on her own. But she was like, you know, thank God, like I like my parents. And thank God, like we all get along, because this quarantine would be horrible. But you know, she tells me about some of her friends and some of her classmates that are having a horrible time because they just don't get along, and that's kind of, this quarantine is showing the cracks in a lot of people's relationship. But you know, again, it comes back to that whole rock and roll is rebellion. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to have an anger in it. You're supposed to stand up for something, because if you don't stand up for something, then you'll stand up for nothing.
That's right. You know, I'm lucky. My daughter's 11, and she's not at the stage yet where she hates me. So I got lucky with quarantine.
You're good. You're good. I think you'll have a fine relationship with
her. Over the years, you have been the publicist for major bands. What does that look like from how do you do it? That sounds silly, but how does it actually work? I've been an entertainer for 13 years in Western Canada, making my gig shows, and it's what I've been doing. So how does a person actually go from where I'm at as an entertainer to being a household name?
Really, it's the songs. I mean, that's the one thing that a lot of these artists, whether it's David Clayton Thomas or Sash Jordan, Andy Kim, Randy Bachman, Sinead O'Connor, Ray Charles, Jerry Lee Lewis, Ringo Starr, it's all the things that they tell me over and over again. Is like, doesn't matter about the videos. The videos helped. Being on MTV helped. But if you didn't have a recognizable song that people can sing within a couple of minutes of hearing it, you had to try again, and it just didn't work. You know, Dave Grohl has a really great line, and he said that the reason why he loves songwriting and music so much is because he writes in seclusion along with maybe one or two other people that are in his life, and then he gets to perform that and hear that song back sung to him by 50,000 people, all with 50,000 different memories and their own experiences in relation to that song. It's why Taylor Swift is so great. She was able to take a personal memory of some boy not talking to her when she was 12 years old, went home in her diary and wrote Love Story. That's where it comes from. We can all relate to that. So these songwriters that are now, you know, successful and classic are, they were able to tap into a collective memory, but at the same time not having any idea that it was going to be a hit. In fact, Randy Bachman is really the only person I've worked with in my entire life who was so self-confident in his music that he knew what he was writing was a hit. And that's probably because he would be borrowing or, you know, listening to a riff over and over again that was a hit and turning it around and changing it and messing it up and making it into his own song. So he knew the insides and outs of a pop hit, which is why he's so successful on his radio show breaking down the music. Everybody else that I've worked with had no idea that they were going to end up selling 1 million copies of their song, because so many things have to go right. So that was my long answer. My short answer is it's a miracle that anything happens correctly in this industry, because you've got people like me, the A&R person who signs you, the video team, the record
Yep.
label, the publisher, the distributor, Spotify staff, iTunes staff, Google staff, Apple staff. We all have to work together in order to create this hit. Do you know how many thousands of people that takes for a worldwide hit across the country? And everybody has to be on the same page. It's why Spotify is uploading 54,000 tracks a day, but only 99.9% of them will ever have more than 100 streams in their lifetime because they're not that good.
That makes sense. You know, talking about Spotify, they just signed Joe Rogan, for the comedian, and that's what I actually do. I do stage hypnosis across the West here, and yeah, that's the reaction I get. It's been a 15-year journey that's led nowhere except being able to feed my family, basically. But when you look at something like that for $100 million, I think is what was reported.
Yeah.
How do people in the industry justify that? Where is the value proposition that people are actually getting from that? Is it just being paid for by ads and stuff like that, or are people purchasing that? I know it's a weird question, but
no, and it's a very good question because it's kind of like, where does the money actually come from? And for a deal like that, three things have to happen. The first is, what's the questionable value of now Spotify having their name associated with Joe Rogan? And it's in the tens of millions because that's how many people in the media wrote about this deal, giving not only Joe Rogan, but Spotify free press. So you take a look at something like that and say, well, we just actually made $20 million already just in earned media. You also have to look at the subscription model, which now there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be owning Spotify subscriptions solely because of Joe Rogan. And we saw that with Howard Stern when he went from terrestrial radio brilliantly to Spotify to SiriusXM. I have a show on SiriusXM, but even before then, people were like, he made the worst decision of his life. And it's like, no, because not only did he bring value, but he sold millions of subscriptions throughout that. The third is that now that you can sell the advertising on the free platform, you're going to have a bunch of people, and the bunch really is like hundreds of thousands of people that will never sign up for a subscription, but they're going to start running ads throughout that Spotify can charge. I bet that they start making that $100 million. I think that they'll probably break even in the first year and a half. I think it's a great move. I think it might even be less than that. If they got 1 million subscribers at $10 a month extra, that's only 10 months and they're right back where they started, right? Totally.
And so a lot of people wonder where does this money even come from? So yeah, as an activist, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, from the environment to we're in Canada. Our political landscape here, our country is not as divided as the US, but we're pretty divided, right? I'm out west. Yeah. We're talking about separating all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's crazy. But
hey, you know what? I'm in Toronto, which is the giant cultural melting pot. You can go an hour in either direction of downtown Toronto, even 10 minutes, and hit every different ethnic group potentially that this country has to offer. So I hear you exactly what you're saying.
So my question in regards to that, there's a lot going on in the US right now, the George Floyd stuff. How can we as artists, because I consider myself an artist, even though I'm not a musician, I'm still you
have a platform.
Yes. How can we start to heal the rifts that are happening? Because let's face it, since Martin Luther King, there hasn't been somebody who's actually stood up and said, we need this to stop. We need this to change in a way that we're not treating each other like animals anymore. And let's face it, I'm a middle-aged white dude.
Sure.
I don't have a row to hoe in this, but I see people being. We watched a video. The world watched a video of a guy being murdered.
Yeah.
Yes, like last week. So how do we start to change this with music, with art?
It's interesting that you said that about being a middle-aged white man, because, there are a lot of people that would say that we don't really have a voice in this. But the fact is, though, that, we
have
kind
the
of grew up.
strongest voice.
Well, yeah, you know what? I grew up with Malcolm X, with reading about him and seeing that amazing Spike Lee doc that, or that docudrama, that a lot of people's first impressions of him. And he had a great line. He was like, "Just get out of the way," when he was talking to a white teenage woman. And part of my philosophy is this is not my battle, but you know what? This actually is my battle, because not only am I a human being, but I have a voice, and as a citizen of this city, of this country, of this world, then we have to stand up and say no. Like, there's no way that this can ever happen again. As an artist, though, you have to understand that there are both sides to the issue when it comes to certain people, and those certain people are your audience. And so, yeah, even when you can look back and say the Iraq war was a horrible decision, which I believe, but at the time when the Dixie Chicks said that, they lost half their audience, they lost most of the country radio stations. Still to this day, they received death threats. Fox News said that they should be slapped. There's so many things that you have to take into consideration as an artist. Part of it is, are you able to use your voice in a fruitful manner? Can you write a song about it? Can you write a tweet about it? Can you write a post about it? Are you just an armchair quarterback, making fun of or being angry at what's going on and posting and tweeting about it and said, well, I'm done? Well, that doesn't solve anything, until I think a couple of things that are happening. And one of them is that, especially with this situation currently, is that I think the amount of pressure that happened on social media is allowing, the White House and the President of the United States to actually start putting pressure to make some changes. But as an artist, though, you have to understand that just because you have a voice, it doesn't mean that you should use it. And if you're only thinking about maybe success and popularity and selling albums and streaming and views on YouTube, maybe you sit this one out. Only if you are worried that half your audience is going to disagree with you, because you can be blocked just because you have free speech. And we're seeing this now with
Yes.
with Donald Trump trying to, like, make an executive order against Twitter. Just because you have a voice doesn't mean that it's correct and that it's the truth. So where we can all sit here and say, obviously those police officers in Minneapolis and were so over the line when it came to this stuff. Well, you know what? I don't know the story. And there's probably a lot of people who will side with the police and the cops no matter what. Those people might be your fans. So in using your voice, you actually might get a lot of good thought, good tweet, good pose. I like this. I'm going to smash that retweet button. There might also be a lot of people who will say, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're white, you're male, you're not even a police officer. You have no idea what the pressures are. Like, they may look at the same video that you and I are looking at and have a completely different truth. And if you ever wanted to doubt that, just remind yourself that 35% of the Americans still think that Donald Trump is doing a great job.
Yeah. I liken it back to Dolly Parton, right? She refuses to pick a side. On
You don't have to. You can walk away.
Yeah.
Not every argument that you're invited to on social media is one that you have to join. I mean, that's been my philosophy. That's what I taught my daughter Hannah at a really early age. She got verified when she was 13 years old on Spotify, on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. She was one of the youngest people because of her work as an activist. And we told her that, no arguing, no sex, no politics, no nothing, because, even with politics, you have to understand that who you work with right now as an activist might be completely different than the person 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. So you just have to want to make the world a better place. There's no reason sometimes to call out specific people. Let's just kind of talk about big ideas, because that's what I grew up with social media about. It was where we can exchange ideas, not necessarily hurt one another in that way.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So where do you see the industry going in the next year? What is your goal? Who are you currently promoting that you want to get out there? Are you still doing publicity? I assume that's what it says on your website.
Actually, I've never been busier, to be honest with you, and that's just not a line. It's because we're probably not going to see any concerts or gigs or shows until 2021. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that there is not going to be any arena or stadium shows until at least the next 18 months. Regardless if you even want to think about having social distancing at an arena show, it just can't happen. The money is not there to have a 20,000 seat venue have only 5,000 people in there. It's just not feasible. Forget about, the drive-in theater. It's cute. It's nice. Major cities in Canada don't have them. So that's fun and it's great, but that's not feasible except for maybe a couple of artists here and there. But for me personally, I've worked with artists every single day to make sure that they're staying up on their social media. They keep releasing great music. They're still writing. They're still recording. They might be still recording with other people using file sharing or sending files through Google or through Apple or email. They're making new videos. I have one band right now that's made 7 different videos for one song that they have on Spotify. They were stuck in the middle of mastering an EP and they only completed one song. They've made a lyric video, an official video, a live video, an acoustic video, an a cappella video, a slideshow. And I probably just like one other, a static JPEG with the album cover on it. All of that is designed to keep their fans interested in the creative process. So for me personally, there are a ton of nonprofit groups out there that can certainly use a boost and a leg up when it comes to social media. So a lot of these artists every single day are picking a nonprofit group to put the spotlight on, whether it's something like the Daily Bread Food Bank or local nonprofit groups that they love. And so for me, it's just a matter of just continuing to come up with ideas for them to keep busy. But yeah, this hasn't slowed down, which is really funny because when this whole quarantine happened, I went from 900 tour dates down to 0. And I thought for 5 minutes, I let myself freak out for 5 minutes. And then I went back inside and said, all right, let's get to work.
It's funny. I took about a week off and I said, Jesse, you have 0 shows coming in for the next year. You're not working till January. And no matter what anybody else says, it's not going to happen. So that's what this show was born out of, was I got to do something.
Sure. And it's funny because people like you and people like the artists that I work with, when this is all said and done, when this is all over and we're all back outside in a big way, it's going to be those people that manage to stay creative and keep busy and keep consistent that are going to win. I hate to use like the winning and losing term, but those people are going to be the ones that are going to keep their audience and grow their audience rather than, hey, so where have you been for the last 9.5 months?
Yep. That's exactly it. Where can people, we got 10 minutes or so left. Where can people actually find you if they wanted to follow you and stuff like that?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter, and Twitter is at that Eric Alper. They can go to the website anytime at thatericalper.com, and Instagram is also that Eric Alper as well. And I'm always up for listening to people's music or sharing ideas or answering any questions people have about the industry.
That's awesome. Now, I want to talk about your daughter, and you've brought her up a couple times. She is an activist. I
tend to do that.
Well, no, that's perfectly fine. Mine was sitting beside me and angrily looking at me while I was doing this, so I get it too, and she knows better. But your daughter, she's an activist and stuff, and a bunch of other things. When she was younger, she was obviously meeting all these people backstage and stuff. Was there ever a time when she was overwhelmed that you actually saw her overwhelmed with the people she was meeting? Because let's face it, it's crazy.
Yeah. When you're young, you tend not to have a very large perspective. So if you love somebody in terms of music and then you get to meet them, you kind of freak out, but you don't really understand how lucky you are to be able to do something like that. Not that I'm a golden god or anything like that, but you don't realize that all those people behind the fence that are waiting for even a hello from that artist, that have been there for 6 hours waiting for even a glance, they're still waiting when you get the nice backstage pass in order to go and say hi. As she got older, and she got older very quickly when she started hooking up with Free the Children and the We organization, and speaking at schools across Canada. She's now spoken at just under 40 We Days across North America. Really? She's written her first book called Momentous, which was a bestseller on Amazon in social studies. So she's met everybody, every star that you can possibly think of, right up from Martin Luther King Jr. all the way down to activists and the kids of Parkland. Those people are her heroes. And so those people, she's still kind of, very happy that she gets to have a voice and use it and have that platform on social media. But the overwhelming part, I think, came in when she was speaking in front of 25,000 people at the Air Canada Center for We Day, and then went back to her school the next day and was kind of bullied. And people were like, so have you saved the world yet, Hannah? And that kind of screwed your head, because that happens to even the biggest stars of the world. You and I, we were talking before we actually started this live broadcast about Nickelback. Nickelback happens to be not just one of the greatest bands in terms of rock music in history, fight me on that, but they
No,
happen
I
to
agree.
be one of the nicest, kindest people I have ever met in the industry. And I feel bad for them, because yes, they've sold 50 million albums and they have amazing partners and wives and children and homes and all of that stuff, and they get to tour the world, but they're people with feelings. And I'm sure in the beginning of their career, when they were getting all that hate too, it was kind of like, well, what did we do? Same thing with Hannah. It was kind of like, well, what do I do except for want to make the world a better place? What's so bad about that? So the overwhelming part of it for her came from just the two sides of the coin, knowing that not everybody is going to appreciate what you do. Look at Greta Thunberg. Like, what on earth could anybody possess inside of them to hate on a 13-year-old girl who just wants to have a future? For crying out loud, but
It,
so then we
it's
can say,
insane.
well, I mean, we can say, well, that says more about them than it does about her. Well, of course it does. But what are you going to do about it? Like, what are we going to do? What kind of platforms are we going to have to allow this hate to happen? And you know what? We're seeing it now with Twitter actually standing up and fact checking people. And maybe that's what they should do more of. But it's certainly not going to get any kinder before. I mean, this quarantine, it just put everything on a stop. We're not suddenly going to be able to go outside and everybody's going to be hunky-dory and all of a sudden start hugging one another and claiming everything's all right. It's going to take 3 days for people to forget about just how nice and how kind and how we're all in this together. We're not. We're not. We're all, we see that I am, you are, most of these people are, but as a society, no way. That ship has sailed a long time ago.
Yeah. You talk about the Greta thing, and the biggest thing is that I see is it's 70-year-old people that were part of Woodstock or part of that hippie movement, and they wanted the same damn things just 50 years ago.
Everybody
right?
does. Everybody
Right?
does. Look, even this. Here's the other thing too. Yes, that Woodstock generation ended up being the baby boomers, and they ended up being the generation of greed with Wall Street, and the my generation, and the
Yeah.
ripping off everybody, and Reaganomics, and the trickle down theory, and all of that stuff. It was the Me Too, not talking about sex, but Me Too with where's mine, or I should be able to get mine. But
Yeah.
as much as we can say, well, what happened to them? It was like, you know what? You just saw 10% of the population of America at Woodstock. You didn't see what was going on down south. You didn't see, and I'm constantly thinking about that. As much as I think Obama was amazing, as much as I think Bill Clinton was amazing, you can probably figure out where I stand politically based on those two statements. But as much as I think about that, there's still a lot of people out there that said, yeah, he did nothing for me. I'm still unemployed. The factories are gone.
Yeah.
Where were they?
But
When things were bad and stuff.
my
So
thing about that
yeah,
is it the politicians' problem that the factories are gone? Is it really the politicians that should be taking care of that, or should
yeah.
the people be? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I
it,
tweeted a couple of months ago that your dreams are your own problem. Your dreams are your own responsibility. It's not your government. It's not your parents. It's not your school's responsibility to make
that's
sure
right.
that you have a happy, fulfilling life. That's you. That's
That's you.
your problem. And if you just talk to anybody that kind of fell through that system that ended up having a great life, there's lessons to be learned from there. But again, we're not all thinking of the same line, but there never were. And look, and even while I can sit here and say that I'm a liberal or that I'm a Democrat, uh, people forget 40 years ago, wasn't the Democrats that, pushed forward the civil rights movement. It was the Republicans.
Yep, it was the Republicans. Yep.
So as much as we can all sit here and say that party was the party of truth and honor and respect, for a long time, it really wasn't. So you kind of, you can only throw your hands up in the air and say, we deserve the celebrities that we get, and we deserve the politician that we get. It's why I never complain about the Kardashians or other celebrities or reality television. We all earned this. You don't like it, stop watching it, stop talking about it, stop tweeting about it. All they want is just the responsibility of continuing to be a celebrity, even if it is for no celebrity's sake. But you get the people that you deserve in your life.
That's absolutely true. Eric, we have went 29 minutes, and holy cow, did it go fast. Eh?
This is great. I love talking to you, Jesse. This is amazing. I love your platform and what you're doing.
The truth is, we're two Canadians just talking to each other like bros, right? If I'm sure,
did you see what Tommy was wearing yesterday? Yeah, I hear you. But it's interesting that, in looking at your past shows, it's great because you're looking at it from like 10,000 feet above what everything is going on, but still with one foot in what's going on as well.
The fact of the matter about the show is it's designed to help little old ladies out. That's my whole goal with the show. I want in Ontario specifically, they've been locked in the homes for like 70 days now, right? And it's basically solitary confinement. So I'm hoping somehow their family snuck an iPad in, and somehow they found the show, and somehow they get to watch and have a conversation with real people for
I hear
a half hour.
That's exactly it. And you're doing great.
So before we end the show, the last question I always ask is, what have you done for yourself? Not for anybody else other than this interview, because let's face it, this mediocre at best, right? What's something that you've done to make yourself happy?
Recently, because of the quarantine?
Today.
You know what? It was my birthday yesterday, so I turned 50. So I spent my morning writing thank you notes to all of the people that made videos for me during this magical mystery tour that I went on secretly, that my wife and daughter organized. So we went to go visit a whole bunch of places throughout the city that meant something to me, and showed me a video of somebody talking about that to me, corresponding with that moment. So I went to my high school, and then my best friend from high school made a video with all my best friends from high school. So I spent the morning writing thank you notes, and I was so grateful that they were all in my lives. So that's what I did today, and I love that.
That's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. Before we end
off,
and
then I went out and drank a Mickey of 15 different alcohol. No, I'm only kidding.
If you did, you're 50. Be careful, because you're not going to be doing very well afterwards.
I know.
I'm going to end the broadcast, and I'll keep you on for 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Awesome. That's great.